Welcome to OT Cyber from the plant floor up. We will be interviewing the host, Jeff Smith. He is the CTO of DYNICS, and we'll be talking about Net-Optix. Can you just tell our audience a little bit about what Net-Optix is?
Sure, Jen. Thanks. Net-Optix is a software-defined networking controller, commonly referred to as SDN. SDN got its start about 10 years ago or so, and it's very prevalent in the cloud space today. It's rolling through the enterprise, meaning it's becoming more and more popular. And Net-Optix is really the first adaptation of software-defined networking to the OT space or the plant floor networks. If you look at SDN as a technology and you try to apply it to the plant floor, there's probably a half a dozen gaps that have to be bridged before it really makes sense on the plant floor. But what's amazing is once you've bridged those gaps, it really becomes the question of why would I use anything else?
That's interesting. And I've heard you speak a couple times before, but I guess for why SDN? And I know you've always also used the example of the lunch break example of where you can't take a lunch break and not have to worry about monitoring the devices. And I probably am butchering that analogy, so you can tell it better. But I'd love to kind of just expand a little bit more on SDN before we go into a little more details.
Sure. There's a lot of products today that allow you to visualize the network, and visualization is one of the primary asks of of management to an IT organization. So these products by other companies do a great job monitoring the system, except that in many cases they have to tap the network, which means they have to put small sensors all over the network, potentially increasing the risk because every time you break the network cable to add a tap or tie it in, you insert risk. The other thing they have to do is to actively scan the network, which means they add traffic and load to the network to go out and try to figure out what's there. So that's kind of how they accomplish visibility. In the world of SDN, the network itself is the SDN network. So it's standard IEEE Ethernet, completely unmodified. The only thing that's different about SDN is how the network is managed. So instead of having 250 switches dispersed across the plant that you have to go to each one and make a configuration change, or if you find that there's a problem with traffic getting in that shouldn't, or something's not being allowed that should, instead of having to visit 250 switches, you can do it all from a single location or single visual console that gives you the absolute, in nearly real-time look and feel of what's out there. So the visibility, the alerting, if I plug something in, I know about it immediately. I know what was plugged in, what switch port it was plugged into, what protocol it's trying to talk, and what it's trying to talk to. And so that's the visibility side of things. The other piece is control, and none of the other packages from anybody on the market allow control. So the analogy is, if I let somebody into my house and I give them 3 hours to burglarize me, what's the likelihood they're going to get away with something I don't want them to have versus if I'm, standing at a locked door, or I'm at the neighbor's and my alarm goes off as soon as they enter, but they can't actually get in because the door is locked and prevents them from getting in. It allows me to respond immediately, but the system has already done an automated response and blocked the unwanted access. We're really the only system by virtue of using software-defined networking that allows you to do that. So you get all the visibility that you want in nearly real time, which is much faster than the other packages out there. And you get, it's essentially like having a firewall on every port of every switch. So you get nearly real-time control of the network. Well, it really is real-time control of the network. So
quick question here, Jeff, because I feel like, at the end of the day, like ease of use for building or baking security into the systems is really something that I think, engineers and developers and all the kin but it's also, we want to make it a seamless experience. So from an integration standpoint, is Net-Optix seamless to integrate into current systems?
in the world of SDN and Net-Optix, the switch platform that you're currently using, if it supports a protocol called OpenFlow, then it's generally pretty seamless to integrate. And many switches do support it, from the big players to Cisco, to Allied Telesis, to DYNICS, to Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories, for example, support OpenFlow, and many more companies are coming online quickly that do. The second piece is if you have an existing legacy system with Net-Optix, and this is one of those gaps we've bridged, is you can plug it into a standard, let's call it a star topology network that uses rapid spanning tree and perhaps some VLANs, and you can plug into that network and we will automatically identify the VLANs and will automatically talk spanning tree if needed. So it makes it very, very easy to tie it into existing systems.
That is music to my ears. I think that is one of the key benefits also of Net-Optix. And in regards to the industry, I would love to have a little industry, Jeff. In regards to kind of what you're seeing currently, could you kind of give, seeing what's going on within the critical infrastructure and manufacturing world, is there a real time or recent event example that you could point to where Net-Optix would have helped, I guess, prevent vulnerabilities?
That's a great question, and it's a little bit the answer is a bit ambiguous, because in any security environment, it depends a great deal on how the system is configured. So, for example, if I allow, and so the system with Net-Optix is deny by default, and let's say, for example, I'm using a Rockwell platform with Ethernet IP. If the only thing I'm allowing on the network is Ethernet IP, then absolutely any number of these ransomware, malware, cyber attacks that have happened recently would have been prevented. If, on the other hand, I'm allowing Ethernet IP and a half a dozen other protocols that may or may not have any business being on the network, it's possible that they're going to get through simply because you've opened up the window and allowed it. That's why we start out with deny by default, and we really say, don't open up anything more than you need to. And the cool thing about Net-Optix is we have a learning mode. So instead of having to try to figure that out, you can turn on learning mode, and it'll learn all the traffic that's happening on every port of every switch, what it's talking to, what port it's talking on, what protocol it is, what the endpoints are, and it'll write what we call rules to allow that, which turns into a term in the SDN world called flows. And a flow is really just the flow of data between two endpoints over a given protocol. When you're done with learn mode, you can then just go back through the rules and say, oh, okay, I saw FTP traffic. I don't want FTP traffic, and you can delete that rule. I don't want anybody telnetting or SSHing, or, oh, look, somebody plugged a laptop in and Profinet was on my Ethernet IP network. I don't want Profinet, so I can remove the rule that allowed the Profinet. And then taking that a step further, down the road, if I have, let's say I have a line come into my plant, and then 6 months later, I have 3 more machines, perhaps it's, phase 2 of the installation. I don't want to put the whole network back in learn mode, because, at the other end of the football field along assembly system, there may be somebody who has plugged in a cellular modem, and currently the system is preventing that modem from gaining access to the network. And if I put the whole system in learn mode and I forget to look through what rules are generated, then I potentially let that in. But if I just add 3 new stations with 3 new switches, and I only put those 3 switches in learn mode, then I don't have to worry about anything in the existing network being a problem. Ease of use is critical. I tell customers, if it takes me more than 15 minutes to teach you how to manage your network and secure your network with this, we've done something wrong. And recently, in conversation between one of the big 3 automotives that we're working with to implement software-defined networking on their plant floor, made a comment to an integration company, and that was, Jeff said it takes 15 minutes to teach me this, and he said I really picked it up in about 10. So that was kind of a great testimony to the simplicity of the interface.
Wow. I mean, I just like to hear ease of use, because I think, and visibility, I think, is big here as well, where you're saying that, you can see all the systems at play and being able to kind of like really have a full outlook on things that you can easily remove by or adding by having to do that manually, which I think is a big differentiator as well. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants to be efficient and effective in their work, right? And being able to have and I think with it's like saying hello to efficiency and goodbye to the annoyance of all the steps of having to integrate any types of security. So that is great, and I love that testimonial as well. I guess from a standpoint too, Jeff, is from what is kind of, this is kind of going outside a little bit of focusing on specifically Net-Optix, but I think it plays into just the overall digital transformation and product development. Is where do you kind of see like the future of the manufacturing industry kind of going from a cybersecurity standpoint? I mean, I know a lot of the work that we're doing at DYNICS plays into developing some of those technologies for the future.
Yeah, I think obviously the two main asks are visibility, and people are quickly learning that control is also necessary. There's a lot of competing technologies in the world, but the question is, do those technologies actually solve problems that the customer is facing? TSN is one, right? Time sensitive networking. That has a tremendous place in certain markets, perhaps trains, planes, not so much automobiles. And then, but it really doesn't necessarily apply. It doesn't bring a tremendous amount of benefit to other industries. And I think those companies that are pushing that technology are starting to understand that you really need something that provides a value or I used to say when I was an end user that we make a change when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And that's really where people are today. The pain of staying the same is becoming great with more and more problems from a malware perspective, from internal errors and mistakes being made, to outside people compromising your system, and just more and more attack vectors being opened up on your network with this Industry 4.0 IoT thing. So people are trying to get into more secure, more visible into their existing systems, and figuring out how to take a future system and add that level of security and safety and visibility, but not compromise ease of use. And that's a little tongue in cheek, because many of the systems that are out there today don't provide ease of use, and they don't provide visibility and security. So I think the OT space needs to quit settling for. They need to quit settling for these companies who build IT grade products and thought, hey, let's make it 24 volts and we'll call it industrial. They need to quit settling for companies who make software that looks great, has some awesome graphics, which are important, but there has to be substance. There has to be a problem being solved. So, visibility is wonderful, but inability to control. And another company who feels that way, along with, so Net-Optix is a Veracity product, who's a partner of DYNICS. And we also work with a company named Centripetal, and Centripetal Networks believes the same thing we do, that visibility is awesome, but if you don't have control and visibility, you're really not protecting your network. You're just monitoring your network, and monitoring without protection doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. It's also it's like setting down the foundation and being proactive rather than having to clean up the mess after the fact. And I think that's a really good point. I mean, I can relate, not saying, but it's kind of changing all my passwords on a monthly basis rather than kind of just waiting for my accounts to get hacked. So I'm trying to be better about that. That's the closest that I can probably relate to having a good digital hygiene from a cybersecurity standpoint. But this is awesome. Is there anything else, Jeff, you wanted to just add about Net-Optix or the industry in general?
Yeah, I think from a perspective of Net-Optix, there's a lot of features that we don't have time to talk about here. But certainly, if people want to know more about it, they can reach out to me at DYNICS. And we can talk a lot about the product and what it can do. I will honestly say I have yet to show it to someone whose jaw doesn't drop, and they want to know more, see more, and do more with it. Because I started out in 25, 30 years ago as a manager for engineering technologies, then senior manager for engineering technologies at a global tier one automotive. They're about an $8 billion company today. And if I would have had everything that Net-Optix brings to the table then, like I do now, I would have done things a lot differently and much more simply.
Well, that is a great teaser for people to reach out. And I would say we could go into the features, but then, then why would they need to reach out and have a fabulous conversation with you? Well, thank you so much, Jeff. This has been awesome. This episode was dedicated to talking about the introduction to Net-Optix. As mentioned, Jeff said it is a product of a partner of ours, Veracity. And if you want to learn more, feel free to reach out to Jeff Smith at DYNICS. We'll put all that information in the description for this episode, and we'll catch you next time on the third episode of OT Cyber from the Plant Floor Up. Thanks so much, Jeff.
Yes, thanks, Jen. Have a great weekend.